Hello, hello. So I am Jade, and we are here to talk about the Duggan method. We've got just a few seconds before we're ready to start. Give everybody just a minute to pop on. If you're here already, pop in the chat and just say your name and where you're coming in from so we can see where in the globe we've got people today. And I'm going to ask that you listen. I'm going to cover a lot of information. I'm actually going to ask that you listen not to try to collect all of the information, just to find a few points that you can actually use and to just go for absorbing whatever you can get out of this without attempting to grasp all of it at once. All right, so welcome. This is the Duggan method. We are going to talk about how professionals like you may be a little bit overwhelmed, especially as we're heading into holiday season and the new year, can turn your current leadership role or your influence role into a much more effective and inspiring career, while also helping your team be better at that as well. So here's what we're going to get to. We've got a 1-minute skill to help you let go of overwhelm and stress at any given moment. Some ways to use your own sensory awareness to help your team be more effective. To notice your body and use it as a really good guide for ending conflict in a nanosecond, and also stopping some of that ongoing stuff that happens back and forth that's ineffective pretty quickly, making better decisions. We're going to go over 3 simple keys to making sure that everyone is communicating effectively. And then we're also going to talk about the basic 5-step process that I use to turn teams into more inspiring, effective places to be, so that you actually, not only that you actually become the force to be reckoned with that you know you can be, and your distractions are immediately gone once you have your focus back and your sanity is back because you aren't letting yourself be distracted by other things. So if you're here, pop in the chat and just say hi. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. There's a little button for you to do that. So I don't want to waste anybody's time. This is essentially designed, this hour specifically is designed for leaders who have a team of 8 or more people, or influencers who at least impact 8 to 10 people a week on a regular basis. You'll still get stuff if you're not in that position right now. That's just who this is specifically designed for. Okay, so we're going to jump right in here. I know a lot of the things that leaders deal with are, some of the things are like not getting enough recognition. Organizations are notorious at not noticing the work you've done, and if they do, they don't deliver it well, and you you might be getting an award, but you're not even available to be at the celebration. You probably got some employees who are chronically unprepared or underprepared, or maybe they're late, maybe they're not delivering their work, or they're delivering it poorly. You may be constantly feeling like you're babysitting. You're navigating conflict either between team members or people coming to you directly. And sometimes you're having to play buffer, right? Your supervisors have one idea of how things should go. Your employees have another idea of how things should go. And you're caught in the middle, attempting to create a bridge. This is chronic. Maybe you're feeling a little burnt out. Maybe you're getting ready to quit. Or maybe your team is starting to burn out, and you can see that they're not really being effective because they're a little overcooked. And maybe even your supervisors are starting to notice this, which means that maybe you're not going to get the bonus you want. Maybe your team is starting to burn out. All right, workplace isms. This is, of course, the biggie. All of the ways that humans stratify ourselves. And so the question is, can we find a new way to deal with this so that we can actually turn around and use the difference? So stratification along class is a big one inside of teams. Specifically, you know, you've got somebody who's a doctor and somebody who's a staff member, and they don't always talk, or there's sort of a background going on around race or sex or gender or ableism or any of that kind of thing. By the way, there will be a transcript available afterwards. Or maybe you have leaders on your team who've been brought up from tech positions and they just haven't really learned to deal with the human aspect of being a leader, and you're having to deal with the fallout of that. And so sometimes these things will lead to feeling kind of like you're not getting recognized, so you're worried you won't get your bonus. You also, or your team members won't be able to get their next promotions. Or you know that the one person who's chronically late and unprepared, you understand the human aspect of it. She's got kids at home, her husband has a chronic illness. You get why she's late, but it's impacting your ability to do what needs to be done. And so you can't actually support her or your team the way you need to. Or your evenings with your family, you finally have a teenager who's talking to you, and 5 minutes into the conversation, you realize you haven't heard anything because you've been caught in thinking about the fires you've been putting out this week at work. Or maybe it's disrupting your sleep, right? You're actually going to fall asleep and you're still thinking about something at work. Or you're noticing that you've got tension and your blood pressure is starting to come up and you know that it's related to this kind of stress at work. And you used to be able to leave it at work and you were doing good with that. And now that boundary is starting to fall apart a little bit. You're going home and you're noticing that you're still carrying it with you. And you got that one sort of HR nightmare, that one employee who keeps crossing other people's boundaries. And it's weighing on you because you also know that you want to take care of the people that you work with. Or maybe it's as simple as between emails and too many meetings and too many deadlines, you're not able to make the kind of progress and create the kind of vision inside of your team that you really know is possible. These are all the things that lead to burnout. These are the things that we call stress that add up. And it's possible that you have a bigger vision for what's possible inside of your workplace or for yourself, even for your life. And you just don't know how to get everybody else on board. You're not able to actually share that with them. And if your team is being inefficient, maybe you don't get your next promotion, right? Maybe you don't get to move up the ladder. Maybe you don't get the bonus that you know you deserve, right? That comes back to that recognition. You're not getting the recognition. And it's sometimes because of your team. So those things are all symptoms of other underlying issues, okay? Stress itself is not really the problem. The core of this is that you didn't really learn the skills that I'm about to teach you. You probably should have gotten them in kindergarten. And honestly, you didn't even get them in your leadership training because most leadership training is designed to solve the top level issues. It's designed to solve the inefficiencies. It's designed to essentially put a Band-Aid on something, but without treating the deeper wounds, okay? And you are born with a roadmap, so it's not your fault, okay? This is pretty common and it's pretty chronic across the board. And I am going to teach you some things that we're going to get to sort of the nitty-gritty in the root of the core of these issues so we can actually start to make the bigger changes that help us not just mitigate or deal with stress once it's started, actually help us transform it into something useful. So I'm going to make a big claim, and that is in this hour, I'm going to teach you how to turn what look like your biggest challenges into your best opportunities for growth so that you can become I won't say the word in case you're in mixed company, but so that you can become the person that you know you can be, okay? Here's what's possible. This is a quote from Charlie, who was a longtime acupuncture patient, and he said, "I never thought asthma would be my friend. And now I use it to remind me to pay attention to food, sleep, exercise, and emotions." So it's possible that all of the things that currently look like difficult symptoms, whether they be personal or organizational, can actually be used to point to what's going on underneath that needs to be resolved. So what if you could enjoy your work? What if you could really enjoy your work and know exactly how to broach the conversation with the late employee while staying human to support her personally again, so that you actually felt easy about that, didn't feel like a difficult conversation. What if you could be this woman who finally gets that workplace isn't, they've been having diversity trainings for years, right? And it's a lot of great lip service. Some people know a few more pieces of information than they did before, but nothing's really changed. What if you actually were the one who got to the table and actually began to change the things so that pay equity starts happening? Or whatever whatever intersection is your commitment to vision, that you actually begin to make those changes rather than keep talking about the changes. So would you enjoy work more? What if you could actually engage the rest of your team in sharing that larger vision so they can move the ball down the road as well? So what if you could be present to your family so you don't miss the conversations with your kids? The crucial piece of this is that for you, when you walk into the boardroom, can you stay easy in your body so it doesn't become stress, so that what looked like a difficult conversation just becomes a conversation? Okay, so relationships where they look like difficulties, it's really about paying attention to your body and using it as a better guide. And you won't need to compartmentalize. Once you have these skills, what you actually have the capacity to do is be integrated across your life so that work is nourishing and it's not draining, and it actually feeds into fulfilling your home life as well. So physical ailments, this may sound like a big claim to you, and I have seen this numerous times. Things like headaches, ulcers, lab work, blood pressure, all of these things start to shift when you shift your response to things that look like stressors right now, okay? So who am I? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, starting to teach you already, and realize you don't actually know who I am. So I was born into an interesting family of acupuncturists and social pioneers in the organizational development space. And I only say that to say that I have been teaching since I was 17 years old globally. And I have done things like pioneering a program for a Fortune 50 company that was credited with reducing accidents in the western part of the U.S. 50% year over year. It's a pretty short program, but the impact of that was that the woman I was working with who ran this entire division cared about the people she was working with. 50% accident reduction isn't just a nice number for the company. It means that the people didn't have injuries. They could take care of their families because they weren't injured. Well, it was also nice for the company. It was really important for the human aspect. I recently spoke at a conference on burnout. It was at the same event as Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. Those of you in the U.S. Know them as congresspeople who are really pushing some wonderful pieces of legislation, amongst other things. What else? So I've taught lots of executives from Accenture, FINRA, lots of fancy spots, and I've facilitated culture merges with big companies. I'm only saying this so that you can get, a lot of this will sound like decent sociological work here, and it might be nice for you personally as stressors. It's based and grounded in a lot of truly effective actions that I've taken with other people. I've trained hundreds of acupuncturists and executives. The point of this is that I have a long history in both clinic and organizational development. So the crossover between what you notice as stress in your body and what works for your organization, I have a lot of history in. So each organization that I work with, I save them a minimum of $60,000 per engagement. But really, one of the things here's what's really most important to me. I developed the Duggan method out of a lot of work that I did out of some clinical observations and years and years of work that my parents did. And when my father died in 2016, I promised him that I would continue this work. I was the only other person with him when we designed this work together who at that time could really do these trainings. And so I'm committed to making sure that you have access to these practices for the sake of the generations that come after us. As much as I love for your organization to save a lot of money and for you to be happier and more effective, my real commitment is to the next generations. Okay. So let's get on with it. Your company right now may have a meditation room. You may have an acupuncturist on staff. You may have lots of wonderful benefits, but you can't meditate your way to more effectiveness. You can't, spend half an hour on a mat and think it's actually going to make a difference when you don't take that back into the day-to-day world. Emotional intelligence is probably something that you've learned. It's wonderful, but listening empathetically for a couple of hours to a friend is not going to actually change the way your team works together. Listening, being empathetic, it's nice, it's useful, it has its place. It's not going to be effective in changing the way you feel about your workplace. You've listened to Kathy talk about her problems for hours on end, and she's still burning out, right? You know this person. You just can't train this stuff away, is really what I'm pointing to, Sue. And all of this diversity training, if people still aren't feeling heard or seen or understood, it's useless. And actually training in how come that matters is not getting to the part where we actually can get to doing it. So your team essentially needs something a little bit different, something more effective. Here's what I do, okay? So we're going to talk about some of the clues of how we can get something done that does work more effectively. And I'm going to use an image of birds. So if you've ever seen a flock of starlings are these little tiny birds, and they move in flocks of hundreds of birds all in one big movement, and they move in tandem. It almost looks like they're one big object moving together. And we can learn something from them about leadership, because oftentimes you can't even tell which bird is leading that movement. And so the question that I have is, do you currently have something that's practiced, that's repeatable, that's an enforceable method for you to shift yourself and thus your entire flock in any moment? Do you? If you guys are here, why don't you go ahead and put it in the chat. Just say yes or no. Just a little quick hand raise. I see there are a few of you on here, and I don't see any names yet or where you're coming from. You can keep popping those things in here. So I have a secret about how this really works. The way to turn your flock is not really that esoteric. You and your children can learn these skills. You don't even need a yoga mat. I do like yoga. It's just that you don't need anything fancy to get to the part where you can actually do these things on a day-to-day basis. So here we are, the Duggan method, and this is based on this one simple principle. All shutdown, all illness, all symptoms, all organizational issues begin in one single moment of shutdown. And really, truly, all the wars on the planet that you know of right now probably started over a little tiff over a campfire about, whose side of the road we were on. And they just grow and grow and grow unless somebody makes a different choice at some point. Okay. So here's the brief overview of what this is about. This is about how do we get really curious? How do we ask some bigger questions to uncover the deeper issues that right now look like difficulties, but are actually the fault lines where new land masses can grow. So when we can uncover our own resistance to this, and we can sort of take a different tactic and be curious about it, this is how we begin to unlock that kind of murmuration where we begin to be able to turn the flock, okay? And here's how we get here. First, we get really curious. Then we notice a moment of upset. So first, getting curious, we can actually, can you see this on my screen? Nope. Okay. There we go. All right. So first you get really curious. I call it stupid curious because it's like letting go of all of the things that we think we know already. Being curious dissolves our stress instantly. You can't be in a fight and simultaneously be curious. Okay? Then we notice the moment of upset. Our lives are made up of tiny moments, and the question is, what are we going to do with them? Are we going to keep letting ourselves be infected by other people's upsets, by what's going on around us, or are we going to start to design our own bodies differently? The third step is to leverage your body's GPS. Your body is constantly sending you signals about which direction to go for more effectiveness. And all we need to do is actually begin to listen and make the symptoms, right, that look like they're causing us trouble right now, our teachers at the body and the organizational level. Okay. Then we have to communicate clarity. We actually have to help people know what it is we're asking of them. We have to help people speak to us in a way that we actually get what they're wanting us to know from them. Oftentimes we confuse clarity with niceness, and we think that we can't be clear and be nice at the same time. It's not. It is a possibility, I promise you. And the next step is to unlock that culture of impact. Humans are built for learning and growing. We love to learn new things. We love to create momentum. We love to actually feel like we're doing something useful. Right now, at least half of your team probably feel like horses behind the gate, and you just don't know how to unlock it. So we're going to do that with using these skills. When you get these pieces together, when you put these skills together, your body's easier, your relationships are going to be smoother. You're going to be able to hear your teenagers when they finally start talking at the dinner table. So you'll also know when to take action. Your body will tell you when to take action and when not to, when to be quiet and when to speak. What things are to be let go of and what things are actually pointing to a value system that makes you decide that it's worth committing to something different in the world. Okay, so let's get into it here. First step, get so curious, and here's how we do that. And a little background. Right now, you probably, in order to get into the role that you've currently got, you've been asking good questions. You probably have done some tests. You know your Enneagram. You probably know your team's Enneagrams. You've done the 360 assessments across the board. You might even know people's horoscopes. And that's been useful. It helps you understand them better and how they work or how they are currently working. It probably even helps you understand how you work. But at core, it probably hasn't changed how you work together, other than thinking you can put people together like puzzle pieces. So one of the difficulties with getting curious is that you probably think you already know what's going on, and you do have a lot of expertise, and that is useful in certain instances. I'm going to tell a little story here about any of you who are familiar with the US healthcare system knows that we're in kind of a mess here. And so a man named Atul Gawande did some research in an attempt to figure out how come some of the users, so in the US, a lot of our healthcare resources are taken up by a few high users of the system. People who end up in the ER regularly with chronic illnesses that are not well tended to, amongst other things. And it turns out that a Starbucks barista is much more effective at getting to the core of the issue than a doctor. And the reason is that the doctor is only able to ask the questions from their frame of reference. So they're asking diagnostic questions about what's going on, and they're looking for a medical issue. A barista is just being curious. And so the baristas would find out things like, well, so Richard, who ends up in the ER 3 or 4 times a month, turns out he's got an Aunt Cynthia, and Cynthia's also ill, and Richard really spends a lot of his time worrying about Cynthia and taking care of her. So he's going to make sure she's got her meds and forgets to think about himself. So his diabetes gets out of control and he ends up in the hospital. So this is pointing back to letting go of the things we think we know and being willing to get really curious in a new way about what's going on inside of our teams, inside of ourselves, inside of our organization. So your expertise is the most dangerous thing to your curiosity, to your skill of practicing curiosity. And curiosity is like when you notice something going on and you want to change it right away, what happens is you forget to look all the way around. You know, it's like if you wanted to get into a house and you found that the front door was locked, oftentimes we immediately go to picking the lock or taking a battering ram. And curiosity gives us the capacity to walk all around and look at all the windows and make sure we've checked around and we've actually seen what else is possible. What's the simplest answer here? Okay. So the only thing you really know is what you can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. And our inability to do this is crucial, and our ability to notice the nuances of ourselves doing this is also crucial. So this is foundational for these next steps. So right now, just take a moment and take stock. How good are you at noticing the nuances of your own curiosity? So, and all the questions you currently know how to ask are rooted in your own experiences. So however many years you've lived on the planet, those are the questions right now that you're asking. But there are assumptions even underneath that you don't even know about. The assumption that we should even have work, right? That we have to have a team, that our team has to be made up of experts of certain kinds. So asking another question is, how do I know what I know? The way curiosity interrupts stress is that you can't be simultaneously stressed, tense in your body, and curious, because curious has you start to notice what's going on in your body and ask into it rather than get into a fight with it. So there are lots of things we can be curious about, even if we're noticing something going on that feels like a stressor in our environment. There are lots of things we can get curious about before we even begin to think about it as interacting with other human beings. So if you don't have the skill of curiosity, a lot of life is going to keep feeling like a fight rather than something you can learn from. And oftentimes then we'll still be in a constant sort of judgment. Is this a positive or negative thing? Is this a toxic environment? Do I need to get out? And you may decide to get out of something at some point. I would recommend that you not do it until you spend a moment getting really curious about some of the things without even being in the fight. One of those is, what's your own body response to any situation? What are the stories I'm making up about a situation, right? We'll go back to our late employee. They didn't show up on time because they don't respect me. Well, that's one way of looking at it. What do we even mean by respect, right? A phenomenon. What's actually happening? I'm still standing here talking to Julie at 10:30 because we're still thinking about what should have happened at 9:30. Am I noticing something about the human in front of me? Do they have tears? Am I making up stories about that? What language might I be using that's not clear? How am I speaking? What terms am I using? So right now, take a minute to think about those questions. How are you able to stay curious in the face of your own upset or in the face of another person's upset? Do you have team members who get upset and you want to fix it immediately? This is another way of asking this question, is how quickly do you go to noticing a problem and attempting to fix it? How long can you actually stay in the space of being curious about what's really going on underneath? Go ahead and rate yourself, scale of 1 to 10. Let me pop that in the chat box so I get an idea of how you think you're doing with this right now. If I was more technologically advanced, I'd have a poll for you here. All right. So, okay. Sometimes you'll see something, it'll look like a communications issue. Under the hood is a feelings issue. And if you gloss over it, you may not get to, there's a big gift that often happens in the underlying crevice of what that feeling means to somebody and what they're talking about. And you may think you can have this, we'll talk about this in the communication section. You may think you know what they're talking about and you may not really have any idea. And this is where the gold is for you as a leader, as well as for yourself, to know what you're talking about. Second piece is noticing the moment of upset. Our lives are built on a series of moments. So the first thing about noticing upset is to just do it right now, okay? Your life is made up of lots of moments. And one of the quickest ways to do this is to point to a place where it felt like there was friction or conflict. I don't do this because I think that conflict or upset is the most important thing. I do it because, well, because most of you came here because you felt a little bit burned out and you wanted to learn something about stress, but also because it's the place where our bodies are designed to keep highlighting and paying attention to, so we don't keep getting into it. So take a minute and think about, when was the last time that you got upset about something? Today or yesterday? Something could be something small, could be like traffic, it could be a conversation you had. So take a minute and actually think about what that was, okay? Now, did you notice that you were upset? Right now you're thinking about it, I have you thinking about it, but at the moment, did you actually notice that you were upset about something, or did you just, it was just part of the day? Did you finally let it go somehow? Are you still a little bit grumpy when you think about it? Can you still feel a little bit of tension in the back of your neck? If so, are you prone to having headaches? So the good news is, however old you are, you've spent that much of your life already getting in and out of your own upset. So when something happens, you probably already have a lot of ways that you deal with these upsets, but you might not have stopped to take stock of what they are. What are the things that you currently do to get yourself out of a moment like this? Do you sing? Do you dance? Do you jump up and down? Do you listen to a song that you like? Do you meditate? Do you go exercise or run? So these are important. You already have a bunch of these things. And the question that I have is, how long did you spend being upset before you knew to implement something like this? And what we're talking about here is beginning to get quicker and quicker at noticing that moment and implementing some things that you can do, right? Jumping up and down is not always an option in the middle of a board meeting. It's not always an option when you've got a client in front of you who, you've got a big sale on the table, and you actually think, okay, how can I be easier with this? How quickly can you get to that space? And what can you do? So there's always the what's happening, and then there's the how we feel about what's happening. So the upset moment is a moment where we can stop, and our body is thankfully pointing to, wait, something's going on here that I don't like. And then you can figure out what that is. And then the what's happening, how I feel about what's happening, is a separate issue. Can you pull those apart? So this is why we take time to notice these moments, okay? There's an important piece here that I want to make sure that I point to. This is not about not getting upset, and this is not, right, the upset itself is a teacher. There is something that can come up, though, in having this conversation, which is there's a myth that how we feel is important, right? How I feel matters. I need to be heard and listened to and validated. And to some extent, this is true. This is how I feel is crucial information for me, but it's not inherently useful. It's not in and of itself. How I feel doesn't change what's going on in the world. Okay, there are wildfires going on in California, and how I feel about it isn't going to make a difference. So it's pulling apart what's happening from how I feel about what's happening, so that I can get back to being curious, and I can actually begin to look at what are the creative ways I can create a change. Okay. What's at stake with not noticing upset is that our upset doesn't belong to ourselves. When somebody else is in the room, right? You've had a boss walk into the room and they've had a bad morning, and you feel it instantly. It's like a wall, and everybody in the room gets on edge along with them immediately. So you're impacting other people. And another thing to notice is that more often than not, how we feel is a habit of the way our we have wired our brains already. It's a habit of our neurons. Once we give ourselves a happy drug, right? We feel happy and we release some oxytocin and our body feels easy and good. Then we create more receptors for that oxytocin, and our brains actually begin to change. This is what neuroplasticity is about. Our brains begin to change based on our habits of thinking. So if we're used to getting upset about something, we're creating more receptors for being upset about things. And so it's an important moment to notice, is how I feel important? Is it just a habit? Or is it pointing really, sometimes it is pointing to a value system, okay? But the question of, are we going to create the habit further, is that's what's at core of the things like PTSD or other long-term difficulties, is that something happens in a moment, and if we can't catch that moment, we don't realize that we're actually recreating that sensation in our body over and over again, and that our brain becomes used to doing that. So how do we break that up, is by actually going back and noticing, not to go back to that moment. We don't actually care about what happened when you're 4. The question is, anytime now that you're recreating that moment, can you interrupt it and make a new choice, if it's a choice that you want to make to do differently, okay? So, and think about how this applies right now for you in your workplace. Say you, you work for Toyota, and you walk into one of the stores and you see all the staff members and somebody's chit-chatting with somebody else, and you instantly get this flood of, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they know that they were right, and you get that sensation. It's about breaking that sensation up so that doesn't become the habit. Like I said, when you get upset, everybody you touch is impacted, and everybody they touch is also impacted. So if you have 10 people on your team and you walk into a room and you're upset and they go on edge, and they stay on edge all day because they don't have these tools, they go home and they're a little bit rude, or they don't listen to their kids, and then their kids go to the school the next day and bully somebody, right? This is how things spread. When we talk about social change, this is where you are at the core of it, and it matters not only to your body but to everybody else. So oftentimes we get caught looking for the pattern instead of getting really attentive to one moment and trusting that when we change the one moment, we can start changing all of the moments. We have to be careful here, again, with our own arrogance. I am still learning from my subtle reactivity. I have been teaching this, like I said, for 23 years in some version or another. And in this format, I've been teaching it for about 5 or 6 years, maybe a little more than that now. So, and I'm still learning from when I can notice a slight reactivity, right? I'm doing this workshop here. I've never done a webinar before. I notice a little sensation in my body, and the question is, do I call it excitement? Do I call it stress? What do I do with that? So, and until I do that, I can't actually infect a larger culture. I can't come to you and say, oh, it's excitement. If I came here nervous, it would be a very different moment. We'd be having a very different hour together, okay? Your life is not run by good ideas. It's run by habits, and what our habits are impact the people around us. Okay, our moods, our upsets are like sneezes. So don't go sneezing on your peoples. So if you have questions, you can pop them in. We are going to do a Q&A session at the end. Okay, so just if you've got stuff, you can pop them in the chat. So if it's something that I can get to while we're doing this, we can go along. I know I'm talking a lot, and I promised you a bunch of things, so I want to make sure we get to them. Your body is really smart. This is step 3. It's not enough to just notice this. It's actually when you begin to notice your reactivity, when you begin to actually see how you feel when you should speak and when you speak and it matters, or how you feel when speaking is going to land poorly. And you can begin to learn from that. It's that subtlety that you can begin to optimize, or maybe the bigger reactivity as well. So your body is smart. It is literally equipped to self-heal. So all of the things that look like pains or symptoms, and this is true also for the body of your organization. So I want you to think about this in both ways. Your personal symptoms that feel like inflammation are actually pointers. So, when Brian comes into your office and your IBS starts flaring up a little bit because you already know that he's going to have a complaint about something or a reason why his team isn't performing up to speed. And so your belly is actually pointing you maybe to a conversation you haven't had with him or a request. We're going to get to that too. And, you know, the way most organizations right now, the way you may have been learning about this is mindfulness or emotional intelligence. And I want to point out there's a difference to what we're doing here. I don't actually care how often you're thinking about stuff that's been going on for a long time. I don't even necessarily care what you're thinking about. I'm going to ask that you actually suspend your ideas about that your thinking matters and pay attention to your body, because your body is probably already sending you signs. And then you can investigate, is this body just a habitual body, or is this the body that's pointing me to something that matters? Usually, right, this thing, you've got this sensation in your belly when Brian walks into your office, that sensation is pointing you to, it matters to me whether or not Brian's team keeps their jobs next month, after the next quarter, right? It matters to me when we as a larger organization aren't able to fulfill our mission on the planet. It matters to me in some kind of way. So you can start to point to, this is a sign for me to pay attention, okay? So this is how you can begin to make better decisions. And what happens is if you don't do this, what's going to happen is your body's going to send you symptoms anyway, right? Because it's going to help us try to keep pointing back to what we need to shift. And this is not just about getting to noticing our body. It's actually, that's just the first step. The next piece is this a reaction I have to have? Or is this, could I actually let go of the IBS bit of this? And I'm simplifying here. This is a skill that requires repetition and noticing and subtlety. Please don't, you know, fire all of your physicians and acupuncturists and whoever if you've got some serious stuff going on. This is about, though, noticing what the early sign is and noticing, is there some action that you can take that actually helps your body be easier and also helps Brian do his job better. So this is what we can do in this space. So right now, most of your input from the outside world is processed immediately based on our old stuff. So your body is something that you can actually use to notice an old bias and either repeat it or break it up. And if you're not willing to pay attention to that subtlety, oftentimes you're just going to be like the doctor who can't get to the bottom of the question, because your body is going to go into an old way of being immediately without your getting curious about it. And remember, this is a habit. This is not about a good idea about, oh, my body is smart, let me figure it out. Don't figure it out. Practice noticing. Two very, very different things. And this is how we get back to the birds, right? When your body becomes easy in any space and you begin to be able to actually design how you want to walk into a room, whether you've had a flat tire, whether something else, when you begin to walk into a room with that piece, you can actually start to notice that you could have some design over what happens in the larger flock. This is where we can talk about things like mirror neurons. Your body, have you ever walked been in a subway car and somebody yawns, and the next thing you know, half the people in the subway car are yawning? Like, this is something that happens instantaneously. It's a physiological response. And this is how a lot more things work than you realize. This is how come they teach you when hiring, in hiring processes, to gain rapport by mirroring the other person's body movements. And then if you've ever done this, what you realize is you're in this process and you realize you're doing it anyway. You didn't even have to be told to do it because you're already doing it. Okay? So fourth step is communicating clarity, making sure that what you said is heard and making sure that what you're hearing is understood. There are three simple pieces to this, but to just back up a second, all of the things we've been talking about now up until now have been, how do I notice in my own body some things? How do I begin to change? How do I begin to use my own body as a director of the flock, so to speak? And to recognize, though, we are human, and the way we actually get actions done in the world is by using language. And if you've been working in a team, if you've been in an organization, you've probably had at least a few classes in active listening or maybe reflective listening. This isn't really what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is using language to actually design our listening and our speaking so that we can be more effective together. Another note on language, which is that how we speak often reflects how we think. And it's a way that we can see what we're thinking in the world. It's a way other people actually hear how we think. And this is a place where we can see whether or not our values are aligned or misaligned, and we can begin to explore what can look like a big chasm or crevice or stratification, right? This is where a lot of the isms come in, that we can actually see how each other thinks, and we can come back to, can we get curious enough to see what's required to either bridge the gap, or maybe not possible, but at least we're going to know when it's possible and when it's not possible, because we're going to go back to using our body to find that decision in place. Okay. If your team can't speak and listen together effectively, you can't get anything done, or you're going to get things done and you're going to have a lot of mistakes in the process, and you're going to have to keep redoing a lot of things. So talk about wasting time. Most of our listening, so in the very beginning, just before our actual start time at noon, I asked a question about how I'd like for you to be listening. And oftentimes we go into listening from our default mode. If we are clinicians, we listen from diagnostics. If we are executive, we listen to solve problems. If we are leaders, we may be listening for how to guide others. So the question is, what is your default mode of listening? And can you begin to practice designing your listening and actually asking for the kinds of listening that you want? Have you ever had conversation, oftentimes this happens in your personal lives with maybe a partner, where you just want to talk, you need to talk your day out, and they're listening and they're trying to solve your problems, and you're going, please stop trying to solve my problems. I didn't want that. It's because you haven't designed how you're speaking and listening together so that you get the outcome that you want. You imagine how many fights you could avoid with this. So how am I listening? And the result of this is that if you don't know how to do this, you're gonna, either you feel unheard, you may already feel unheard in your organization, right? Your supervisors don't listen to you, your employees might not listen to you, or you've got employees who are constantly saying that no one ever listens to them, or they're feeling unheard. And the question is, do you even know what it would take to feel heard? Okay, it's really hard to make a feeling happen for somebody else, especially if we don't know what the actions are. So how we get to communicating clearly, right? You get things, you ask for something, you think you said it clearly, and you get back something and it's not what you asked for. And so you also have to be willing to welcome some breakdowns in here so that you can iterate and learn from this. Here are the three most basic pieces to this. Okay, first is you have to make sure that you have a committed speaker and a committed listener. If you're doing this via technology, if you are on a chat app, if you are on email, you may want to, if you're opening a conversation that you want to make sure is heard and listened to, you may want to send an initial message checking to make sure that the person is available and not distracted. You know, if they're on their work chat app, but they're actually at their kid's soccer game and they've committed to being present to their kid, you may want to say, let's do this at another time. Okay, so you want to make sure that you've got a committed speaker and that you're committed to listening, right? You're sending an email and somebody is attempting to talk to you. This is not a way for you guys to communicate clearly. Or design how you want to be listened to. If you say, I just need to talk and I don't care if you keep doing your emails, that might be a way. Notice your own body and notice other people's bodies. So are you an upset? Don't make up stories about how other people are. You can't control them anyway. However, if they are visibly upset, now is probably not the time to have a conversation for clarity. You're not going to create clarity out of your own or anyone else's upset. The most important piece of this is your own. Notice your own body. If you are in resistance, if you've forgotten curiosity, now is not the time to be making a request. Now is the time to be checking in and saying, okay, is this a body sensation that's pointing me to something that matters, that I'd like to see happening in the world differently? Or is this just an old way of being reactive to people when they speak? This takes a fair amount of practice. You have been speaking and listening your whole life, and oftentimes there are people that you've gotten into some patterns around it with. Depending on what you're talking about, you can actually get this time to coming back to your own equilibrium down to just a few minutes or even a few seconds in most cases. If you are checking in with your body and you notice that you've got upset or resistance in your body, and you notice that this upset or resistance is actually pointing to your value system, it's pointing to something that matters to you, now's the time that you turn that into a request or a demand. You have to turn this into something actionable. If you think, okay, I'm feeling upset because I don't feel respected and I want them to respect me, the likelihood of somebody else being able to deliver on that is nigh to impossible. I use the word nigh. What you can do is begin to say to yourself, what would respect look like? Would it look like Michelle showing up for work on time 4 out of 5 days a week? Would it look like her sending me an email a day in advance if she's going to be more than 10 minutes late? What does respect look like in the real world? As my mother likes to say, don't tell me you're going to love me forever. Tell me you're going to love me tomorrow at 4 p.m. So get it clear. This is the core of having clear communications, not just for yourself and getting what you want in the world, but also across your teams, okay? If you don't get this, you're gonna waste a lot of your time and a lot of other people's time. So this is a way to stop fights before they happen, and also how to turn things into effective action when you do want something to change, okay? Once you begin communicating clearly, it spreads like wildfire, right? You can become this yawn. Contagious. When I was looking for pictures of yawning, I yawned at least 10 times, just looking at screens full of people yawning. Fifth step is you get to unlocking a culture of impact. Once you put these skills together, you really have a chance to begin to use yourself as the impact for that kind of a murmuration. And first, you have to implement the part about vision. You have to get to what's important, what matters to you. What are you going to do now that you know how to use your body? What's the point? Why bother? So if you work for an organization and you can connect with their mission and you really want to support that vision to happen in the world, first the questions are, is it clearly defined? Is it spoken in a way that you can figure out if your actions are in alignment with that vision or not? Is it really clear what outcomes they're talking about, or is it an amorphous feeling kind of a vision? If it is, you may want to start to do the work of clarifying it. If you work someplace, say you do work at, I don't know, Toyota, and you don't actually care about the cars, you're a bike person, right? You don't think we should have so many cars. And yet you still want to have a workplace that feels easy, that you can go to. You need a job, your employees need jobs. You actually want to be able to create still a culture that will matter to their kids, that will matter to the people that they impact, that will matter to your customers, right? So you can still begin to define your personal mission. How do I want to see myself showing up in the world? And get clear about what that looks like, because then you can begin to inspire others to get on board with you. Once you have a clarity for your own vision, once you have a clarity for your mission, then the people around you can start to know what you're doing, and they will automatically start to gravitate towards doing that too. Like I said, people really want to be useful. They want to be impactful. I want to be, right? Do you want to be? So yeah, if you don't say what you're committed to, if you don't know what you're committed to, most of life is going to be in reactivity. Once you know what you're committed to, this is where the distractions start to fall away. This is where you know easily how to know what to take action on and what needs to just sit. Okay? So whatever that commitment is, this is a place where you begin to design that so that all of the rest of the things start to line up around it. So here's how we use those keys, right? When you design yourself, when you design your new body, when you design yourself around a mission or a commitment, this is also viral, right? You could decide to design yourself as a relaxed leader, right? Somebody who creates an environment where everybody's kind of chilling and yawning and getting things done in a really easy and smooth way. You can design yourself to go into work swift and powerful and fierce, and you're out to catch dinner, right? You've got a mission, you're going to take it on, you're going to get it done. Or you could be inspirational. You could be you could be a visionary leader, and you're holding the larger vision, but really what you're doing is answering questions and holding counsel for people. So once you've got these other skills in place, you get to design who you want to be and so this is about which direction you want to lead your murmuration. And what are you going to choose? You can choose a different way each day if you like, or you can choose to really guide your whole team in one particular way. But are you going to be committed to doing that, regardless of whether or not you got a flat tire this morning, regardless of if you've had a bad quarter, whether or not there's been an administration change? Are you going to stay committed to that so that you can have an easier time, so that you can be more impactful, and you can have what you actually came here to do in the world? So now that you have this design capacity, you can speak and listen. You can effectively create the culture around you the way you want to design it. Somebody has designed the culture in your workplace the way it is. The workplace that you currently have, the one that's feeling burning out and stressed and whatever else, somebody designed that. Maybe not intentionally, but somebody has designed that. So the question is, who's going to design the next one that you're going to be active in? Are you going to do it? And if so, what is it going to look like? If you're not going to do it, I promise you, somebody else will design the culture of your workplace for the next few months or years. Somebody else is going to do it, and they're going to do it with or without your input. So I would recommend, if you are feeling stressed out and you want to shift something, this is your chance. And if you're thinking this can't be done, or like the system is too big, structures are broken, there is no system. You are the system. If you impact 50 people a week and they impact another 100 people, that's 5,000 people. You are the system. Okay? If you don't change it, who is? What would it look like if all the actions inside your team were in integrity with your vision and mission? Okay? So I realize we're getting close to our time here, so I'm going to skip over some of the little pieces here. So this is what we just did, right? We're putting it all back together. How do we get really so curious and notice the moment of upset? This is the part where you get to put it all together. This is the part where you actually end up with a body that feels easy. You end up with relationships that are smoother. And if you're somebody with big mission, vision, you get to empower your organizations to have global impact. You get to have an anti-fragile leadership style. So anti-fragile is a word coined by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and it's about going beyond resiliency. It's actually about using what looks like pressure to actually create the gem that you know is inside of all of that, right? It's turning that into something really powerfully useful and amazing. And here's what you get. This is where HR starts to come to you and say, I don't know what you're doing with your team, but this is really amazing. And in fact, this is actually, I don't really like paperwork. I don't like pitching organizations. So the way I do organizational work is from here. I work with individuals who make their teams go into doing amazing things, and then the organization says, what are you doing? That's how I actually get work in organizations. And it's because I trust that when you take these skills and you go into your team, you're going to change something, and it's going to have an impact both up and down line. And everybody starts to notice this, right? Your supervisors are going to say, what are you doing? You're going to start using all of your own mirror neurons for your own advantage rather than for difficulty. And so, right, your absenteeism is going to be down, your turnover is going to be down, your productivity is going to be up, your effectiveness is going to be up. And personally, you're going to be able to leave work at work. You're going to be able to go on vacation and not worry about coming back from vacation to the pileup, because you're going to also know how to empower others to take on these skills and these roles. This is the part where 3 of the people that are your hardest working employees who are currently burning out are going to start telling you how they finally are exercising and they're able to just take some time for themselves and change things, and they're still going to be working effectively, okay? So here's the part. So you're probably wondering, right, is this something that can work for me? When will I find the time to do this, right? Are you currently frustrated? We talked about this. If you're not effective at getting it done, and if it saves you some money, you're gonna be able to find the time, because right now you're wasting a lot of your current time and your energy, and you're exhausting yourself with it. Maybe you think it can't work for your team. I've worked with thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of organizations, and thousands of individuals. If your team is made of humans, this works. The only way it doesn't work is if you get arrogant instead of curious. Systems are not sick. System is not incurable. You are the system. So here we are. It's an hour. If you stay, you'll get a little bit more. If not, I'm going to pop something in the chat box here. Whoops. And so that you can have access, if you'd like to hop on a call and see whether or not I can be helpful for you with your team specifically or with your current issues. And so here's the things I promised you that we just did. 1-minute skill to dissolve overwhelm stress. Hopefully you're doing that now. Using your senses to transform your team. If you're going back to work, please go do that. Your body is wise. Use it to make better decisions. Begin to practice this right now. 3 keys to making sure everyone's communicating effectively. Play with this. Use it at your holiday dinner tables. These are the 5 steps that I use to transform big teams into places that people really want to work in. Okay, here's it. Here are the steps: curiosity, checking in on the moment, noticing your body, communicating, and unlocking your impact. So we're running over a little bit. I want to offer you this. If you've stayed this whole time, I want to offer you a chance to hop on a call with me so I can help you design this for your team. Now, you've probably seen where you can make some improvements in this. You've watched this whole thing and you notice, okay, I lose my curiosity at times, or I forget to notice the moment of upset, or my team isn't communicating clearly, areas that you need to master. So you can take what you just learned and do your best. And if you want, I've got some spaces to take maybe 20, 30 minutes to talk with you or somebody in your team to talk about how this method could be applied to your organization or the way you work. There is no obligation. This is a free call. This is a good use of me. What I like to do is ask questions. Okay, you've been overwhelmed, you've been stressed, you hopped on this call so you could find a way to do that with more ease and reset yourself for the new year to do something different. Right, and if you've been feeling like you're struggling, not just this week or this month or potentially a year, if it's a decade, please call me. We don't need to have that madness spreading around. And if your relationships are being impacted by your work stress, and you're not able to climb not able to break glass ceiling, much less shatter it for the people around you, and you're ready to do something different, then right now's the time. Let's hop on that call. If you are interested in a call, what we do is we're going to walk through this process specifically for you and your team and to see where you're struggling so we can get a plan to get you past it so that you can create more ease. If it makes sense for us to work together, of course, I will offer you that because I am committed to making these changes in the world and to having all of the people inside of your teams able to have these skills and be effective with them. But there's no pressure, not an obligation. I'm there to support you with your mission in the world. So if I can't help you and I know somebody else who can, I will point you in that direction, right? So I want you to reclaim your power and stop being exhausted by stress and actually start changing the world. Of course, maybe this isn't for everybody. The people that I can help the best are people who lead teams of at least 8 people and who know that there's some room for growth in there. And if you're somebody who is committed to your employees and your team having a more effective workplace culture, and not just more effective, but more fulfilling, then this is the call for you. And please be coachable. Being coachable is a really crucial piece of this. It's hard to learn if you're not. And if you do have a mission to make the world a better place, then let's really get to it. I'm ready for that. So if that's you, I am going to do this. I'm going to post a link to the call application. I'm actually going to include it with your post email, since some of you probably had to go. And you'll answer a few questions on that application so that we don't waste our time on the phone call. You'll pick a time on the calendar, we'll book a call, and then we will get to it, and I will ask you some of the questions that will really help you create big transformation quickly. I know I'm tooting my own horn, and I really have helped thousands of people change their ways of being to great effect, and people pay me to do it. So you get a win-win. I get to ask the questions that help me hone myself better and help you hone your organization better. So you are powerful. I appreciate your coming today. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking your extra 5 minutes over. And if you have questions and you're still here, go ahead and pop them in. I'm new to the webinar. I have not seen questions in the chat, and I don't know if I've just talked too much, but I'd like to know how I can help you. If there's anything right now, you're right here, that I can help you with, I'd like to know what that is. So I'm going to give just a few seconds here. Anybody got a hand raised? Maybe I am new. Oops, we do have hand raises. I'm so sorry. I am new to this webinar thing. How do I unmute you? Brian, are you still here? I'm going to unmute you. Can you ask your question out loud here? Are you still here, Brian? Okay, I can't hear you, Brian, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute you again. See, Edwin, are you there? Edwin, are you there? Oh, I can hear you. Do you have a question?
No, I don't. I was just looking for the chat box, but that presentation was very nice.
Okay, well, so I have not seen anybody in the chat box, so maybe people didn't find it, and hopefully we will redo this webinar sometime soon and smooth out the tech features of chat boxes and such. So hopefully this was useful anyhow. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Jade.
Yes?
Just FYI, I've been typing some questions and it looks like they're not getting to you.
I'm not getting anything in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, so this was a first webinar with, I'll have to do a question and answer someplace else after the fact. All right, thanks. All right, guys, I have not figured out how to answer your questions. What I'm going to do is I will tag you guys in a Facebook post, and we can go live and answer some questions at some point today, or maybe I will attempt to answer them in a post there. All right, so thanks for coming, and I will see you guys on the flip side.